Oh, looks good.
No, looks good. Okay. My only concern was discussing the work plan with Glenn not being here as the vice chair, but as Steph was just saying, maybe we'll just persist and get through as much as we can. And then if some has to wait till next month, or
we'll just assign him everything.
Or if we just need to assign him everything. Yeah, we'll see how we can get through it. And I just wanted to check in with Maureen. Would you have a preference if we discuss the Grafton Lakes issue first in the meeting or later in the meeting? Do you have any issues today for that?
I actually have a conflicting meeting at 2:30 with Metro Vancouver.
Okay.
So between 2:30 and 3, I have to step out. So that's a good spot to do Grafton. Okay,
great. So we'll stick with the order as is then, and we'll discuss the work plan first. And then Maureen's going to step out while we discuss the Grafton Lakes. Okay. Can I have a motion to approve or move? What is it we have to do? Adopt the minutes? No. Approval of the agenda.
Yeah.
Maureen. Okay. Second by Ron. There we go. Okay. And now adoption of the minutes from last time, which was April 20th was our last. Does anybody have any comments on the minutes?
I wasn't sure if the attendance was correct.
Oh. That was for the April one, not the last one, which wasn't truly a meeting because we didn't have quorum.
Okay, I get it.
So this was from almost, a month and a half ago.
Yeah. Okay, I can't remember that.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. I reviewed them at the time, so I'm trusting that they're all good. Okay. Can somebody move the minutes? Yeah, thank you, Ron. Second by Maureen. Okay, all in favor? Yep. Okay, so minutes approved. Public comments. I don't think we have any members of the public staff.
Nope.
Nope. Okay, so no members of the public. Okay, business arising from the minutes. The work plan. So we have it on page 6 to 7 of our.
Do you have a couple of monitors, Robyn? Are you able?
I do. Yeah.
I mean, I can be working. Do you want me to be typing in as we discuss?
Sure. Why not?
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay,
do you want to
so
do a screen share or do you want to just type as we go?
What would members like? Screen share? Or do you want to talk first?
Type as you go, from my point of view.
Yeah.
What'd you say?
Type as you go, but I think it works better.
Yeah. All right. Well, let's just go through it. And if it makes more sense to have Steph's screen shared, then we'll do that.
Sure.
There's only, because it's 2 pages, there's 4 major topics, so hopefully it won't be too complicated. So the work plan that we had drafted, and remind me, Steph, the point is we're going to go through the work plan and basically has it been approved by council?
Has been approved.
It has.
I think it was on the consent agenda.
Okay.
So it was not discussed in detail by council, which is something to keep in mind.
Okay.
And then I think the proposed recommendation was just that we were going to strike subcommittees or prioritize certain items.
Yeah.
In the past, we've assigned names to certain items. So however that feels.
Figure out how we're going to actually tackle it this year.
Yeah.
Okay. So number 1, I'm looking on page 6 of the agenda, is housing needs assessment. And so I think this is sort of follow-up items on the housing needs assessment that was completed last year. Was it beginning of last year? Ensure issues addressed in the housing needs assessments are followed through. So that's the goal. And we had 4 sub items here. So A, develop a list of actionable items, recommend to council. B, contact and establish a nonprofit to provide a rent bank service. C, set targets, identifying a specific number of housing types and units that can be available by certain dates to be approved by council. So sort of recommending a setting of goal by council. And D, make connections and collaborate per the specific strategy mentioned in the housing needs assessment to facilitate more discussion between private nonprofits, developers, and landowners concerning new affordable housing developments. So I feel like those are probably, I think number A is would be the top priority within there, would be to develop a list of actionable items to recommend to council. Although I know Daniel has done work on that, and we had a presentation from him at one of our earlier meetings kind of highlighting things. So I feel like if subcommittee is kind of struck to tackle this one, that would be one of the first things they could do, is just review the work that Daniel's already done and what's been recommended, been prioritized, and what's actually underway, because there might be things underway through the planning department already. And then figuring out if there's other things that we can recommend. Does that sound fair, Daniel?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay, so then for the purposes of sort of documenting this, then I've just put at the end of bullet point A, top priority dash subcommittee in bold. Second item.
Would everybody agree with that? Because I feel like that's kind of a, like, check what's been done. Let's see what's in progress, and then make some recommendations as to other actionable items. And then I would like to see the C, set targets. I'd like to see that as kind of the next priority. Because I feel like that's something that a lot of other municipalities have done. And so we could look for precedents, and it's something that we could advise council. I just think it's a good thing for a community to have, and like more of a medium-term maybe goal, not so much a long-term, but it's not a short-term goal. It's sort of a medium-term goal to sort of set some targets, and then it helps give direction, maybe to them making decisions if there's some ultimate targets being set. Again, today is about kind of prioritizing and assigning work, so I don't want to get into too much discussion, because I know I could go on and on about discussing these items. So given our time and that we're actually sort of prioritizing things, there's 4 headings. Is it that there's sort of 4 subcommittees, or do we, I'm not quite sure. Does anybody have any thoughts? I
like that original idea that there is a shared document that you can add to, and then maybe that's the fastest way to add and delete, you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. Oh, so like as a committee that we would have
the
a
Google
shared
Doc.
document, like a Google Doc or something?
Yeah, I think it was your idea, it wasn't my idea.
Yeah, and then Glenn did it.
It might have been Glenn's, but yeah, between Glenn and I. So do you mean, Fritz, on like every item, or do you mean like as a subcommittee tackling a certain number of things, or like this whole work plan would be a Google Doc that we would all kind of edit and everything?
No, it's only an A, but I don't know.
Yeah, it's not very long.
Yeah, exactly. You can start with the whole thing and see if that works.
Yeah, I guess so. Maybe today's discussion, rather than maybe going point by point, I'm wondering, it's really more of a, how do we want to tackle this as a group, like given the members of who's here and our capacity. I know Glenn's, keen to do some work, so it's a shame he's not here, but we can leave that open, or like Steph said, assign him a bunch of things. But yeah, like how do we actually want to tackle this? Is it creating a couple of subcommittees? Maureen, did you have a thought?
Yeah, I don't think it's creating a couple of subcommittees. I don't think we're big enough to be doing that.
Okay.
I would like 2 things. I'd like to hear from Daniel on what his thoughts are about the best way to approach this, and then I'd like to note that in another of our committees, the Heritage Commission, what we ended up doing was we ended up identifying we have to do these things, and then we identified this is the meeting topic. By the end of this meeting topic, we will have this done. So for an example, develop the list of actionable items for recommendation to council. If that were the sole meeting topic, we could potentially get through to the end of that draft list and have something to take to council, rather than sort of nibbling around the edges. And if there are other sort of big items like that, then put them on the calendar. And if anybody's dead keen to do research, think some things through, they can do that and get it into the schedule. That seems to be working for Heritage Commission, and we were all over the place. So it's one potential approach. But I really would like to hear what Daniel's thoughts are on this. Putting you on the spot, Daniel, sorry.
Can I just jump in first, Maureen, just to clarify, because I think I like that this suggestion, the way you're going is to use our meetings, that we allocate a portion of the meeting as like a working session as a group, since we're all here together, that instead of doing subcommittees or whatever, we as a group use the meeting time to actually work through one of these issues, which I think I'm on board with. So I'll throw it over to Daniel.
I mean, I like that idea, because I think then, especially if we can schedule it out and then plan accordingly. So it's like for the first item, you know, we could have on the agenda of the previous meeting and say, like, next meeting, we're talking about this. You've got it now in advance.
Mm-hmm.
I like that. Like in general, I mean, when I look at the four, you know, work plan items, I think that they're all helpful to me. They're all helpful, like, you know, the committee's interested and eager to research the different things and bring recommendations to the council. That's all helpful. But definitely, I think, Robyn, that first one, the actionable items for the housing needs assessment, I think that's a good one to start with.
Okay. Okay. So I'm just pulling out my calendar and I'm thinking, so if we committed to meet monthly, except August, because I think basically everything stops in August, doesn't it? So if we had July and then we have September, October, November, December. So 1, 2, 3, 4, potentially 5 meetings left this year. But obviously this is kind of a 2021 to 2022 plan. It's not a strict calendar year plan, right? But if we planned out the next, let's say 5 meetings, and maybe the end of today's discussion in the next, 10, 15 minutes before Maureen has to leave, why don't we identify what we think would be the top 5 items for us to discuss at the next 5 meetings? And we sort of schedule those out. Does that sound like a reasonable way to tackle it? And then we can, yeah, okay.
Sure.
So, so let's go through and highlight. So one of the ones I thought was 1A and 1C. So develop list of actionable items and then setting the targets. I feel like those, let's just maybe pull out our top ones and then we can go through them. Maybe Steph, would you be able, that would be a good screen share. So we could sort of pull out, I'll pull mine, you guys jump in, pull out which ones you think might be hard, and then we can look at the shorter list and prioritize and try to get down to 5. If I go ahead to number 2, we've got identify ways municipal can support applications with waivers of fees or fast tracks. B is initiating RFPs or EOIs for certain housing types. C is target review of the land use bylaws, and that one is an ongoing process that we've got some work partly done on that. So I think that would be a good, 2C would be a good one to pull, because we do have work done, like Fritz has done a lot of work and I've done some work pulling into a report. That would be a good one, maybe in, maybe not next month, but maybe September, October to do that one.
1C?
That was 2C.
Oh, 2C, okay.
Which is one, Fritz, you've done some work on, which is the review of the land use bylaw and, looking at smaller minimum lot sizes, maximum house sizes, 2-tier zonings, all of those things.
Yeah.
And that would be nice to have it as a robust discussion as a group. Okay. Just sort of going through them here. I'm looking now ahead to financial tools. Well, 3A is just a recommendation that we could make. And so we could talk about that in a minute. 3B, research ways of raising revenue and how to support other land homeownership models. I mean, I think 3B is a valid one, so I don't know if how much of a priority that is for people.
For me, 3C is important.
Yeah.
Okay.
Land ownership models.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, so let's add that to the list of priorities. And I think 4 kind of overlaps a little bit with some other of the other topics. Researching best practices and exploring different solutions. I like also 2B is an interesting one to me. Did we already put that one? Yeah.
No.
Okay, 2B would be interesting to me. Anybody else? Sorry, I'm mumbling away here. Anybody else have some that they'd want to identify?
Robyn, can I just ask on that bullet point, maximum house size, is that maximum house size dependent upon size of lot? Is there a little bit of a qualifier on that?
I think that's to be discussed. It wasn't really meant as yeah, I can't remember the details, but I think that would be something to be discussed. I think it was the idea of like an ultimate maximum. I believe City of Richmond has introduced an ultimate maximum on house size, and it is aimed at those larger lots. I think that was kind of the idea. But I think the other point that's raised under there as well is the floor space ratio, FSR, discussion, which that's more specifically tied to a lot size.
Yeah.
So it's all part of the discussion. Yeah.
All right.
Mhm.
Fine. I agree with you. When you went through that section 1, I have to say I agreed with the ones that you brought out. I'm sure a rent bank may be very desirable. I think one could, it's not that it's not desirable. I prefer your A and C and make connections to collaborate, etc., etc., etc. You know, yep, that's great. And maybe we have the opportunity to do that. But in terms of specific targets as a priority, I think your A and C are more concise. I would certainly fall with that.
Okay.
Because that is specific.
That's what I like about it as well. There's something specific that we can produce something tangible at the end.
And that's not to run over the other ones, but, you know, in terms of, because otherwise there's just too much work to go around.
Well, that's it. And this is, we still do have to edit a bit and prioritize. And what I like about about making connections and collaborate, I do feel like that one can wait, because it would be, if it was something we were to tackle, I see that as an engagement process, and that would be so much better to do once we can gather safely. So I think the next 5 months is not a good time to plan those things, but hopefully we can see what the new year brings. And if there's safer ways to gather, that's, I think, like a good reason to also put that one off. Okay, any further ones to bring up to the top as Steph's sort of working her way through?
Robyn, had Glenn said that he was going to look into 1B rent banks? Or
I don't remember, to be honest. I can't recall if anybody said they were going to commit to doing that, because it really, that one is actually like really just one person probably can sort of get the ball rolling on that. That doesn't really need a team of people.
yeah, just a couple phone calls to ask if it exists here or there, and if we could piggyback onto it.
Yeah, because I think we did some very quick research, and there are places that cover different municipalities and locations. So there are organizations already established. They cover multiple areas. So yeah, let's throw that one at Glenn, see what he says. And if not, maybe one of the others. Like I say, I think that's what a single person can just kind of take some on. Okay, and then were there any others? If we go back up to that top list.
Robyn, I had one other thought.
Yeah, go ahead.
Maybe this is not a task, or maybe it's a method that applies to any of these, but I'm just wondering about where in all this do we fit to contacting private developers, because ultimately so much development does depend upon private developers. And I wonder what they see as necessary fixes to speed up affordable housing.
That's an interesting one, because we have, if you let's see. So I mean, 1D is about that sort of. It's about more discussion between, you know, privates, nonprofits, but we also have like 2A might touch on that, ways to identify how the municipality can support applications for desired or priority housing types. Okay. I feel like that would be a great one to follow once we've set some targets. Like once we've actually accomplished 1C and we have targets, then it's really easy to then start those discussions to say, hey, here's what we're targeting. For example, if we threw it out there and said, we really want some family-oriented townhouse, you know, attached to townhouse development. Like that was, I'm just throwing it out there as an example. Then if that's something that then council agrees to and everything goes forward, then it's very easy to start a discussion with a developer to say, hey, these are the housing types we're looking for. What do we need to do to help you kind of facilitate that? So I'm in agreement with you, Ron. I think that there are really, really important stakeholder and player in how to get these things built. So I think there's a couple of different ways that they'd be in here. And like I say, with 1D, it'd be nice to actually do that as a bit of an engagement process, maybe in person when we can. And 2A, identifying ways the municipality can support those or desired priority housing types.
Okay, but it's a process, right? That would feed into any of these rather than being an end in itself. Good.
I think so. Yeah, I think it would be something we could do maybe after we've done a few of these and figured a few things out, would be then to engage with them.
Good.
Yeah. Any other thoughts before we sort of scroll up to the top of the list and start to prioritize into the next 5 months?
Well, we haven't been to the bottom yet, I think.
Yeah, you're going.
Oh, sorry.
big next
I've got my
speed here,
two
Robyn.
screen. I'm on my two
Top of the
screens, so I'm just going back and forth.
So one, I
I'm
think
just going
one
back.
has been quite thoroughly been through. 2.
Yeah.
Do you guys feel done with 2?
I didn't really go through E and F there.
You can't really do
Because
much
I
on
think
that.
F is just monitoring infrastructure
Yeah.
challenges. I'm not sure that that's something we need to actively discuss in a meeting.
What about
E is
E?
actually quite good because it makes everybody think a little bit of how this island is supposed to move forward with housing.
Yeah.
I would take 2E for sure.
Okay.
E, you say? Did you say E?
Yeah.
E.
It is certainly a good subject for discussion.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
2, right?
Yeah, I think that was 2E.
Still want to keep them sort of identified with their.
No, that's
curiosity
great.
here.
No, that's really
Okay.
good. Thanks,
Yeah.
Steph. That's good.
And then we're back down to 2.
I think F is already addressed really quite a bit.
That's out of our hands.
Yeah.
Let's get financial tools.
Yeah, and then looking at financial tools. Like say A, I think that could actually just be like a resolution that we do at a meeting one day. I don't think that needs unless we feel it needs a robust discussion.
And these ones are already included.
It's kind of
B
out
and
of
C.
our hands.
Robyn, could we just look at the wording of that? Recommend council prioritize application for introduction of the MRDT. Prioritize application for the introduction. I'm sure it's well intentioned, but I'm not actually quite sure as I read it, looking at the English of that, just what exactly are we trying to say, if I may ask? Prioritize application for introduction. Application for introduction, what is that?
So from my understanding with the MRDT, and I'm happy for Daniel or anybody else to jump in and correct me, for the MRDT to be implemented on Bowen, we have to make an application. And I believe that the planning department was working on this up until last year, and then they hit a snag with the application. There was a certain number of accommodation providers have to approve, all those kinds of things. And so then it kind of, for lack of a better word, it kind of died on the table. Like it's just languished now because it paused. Somebody needed to do some engagement. I think Tourism Bowen Island, and I know Birch was keen to sort of do that. So we've been trying to revive it, but I believe it's not, and I think why it was here is I think some direction from council might help. I don't know if that was done originally from council to sort of say, hey, let's do this. And that's why staff took it on. I don't know, Daniel, if you want to jump in at all, but that was sort of why I think that was in there, is we feel like if council agrees that, yes, this is a priority, we want to put staff to get back on it. I think that's might be a push that's needed at this stage.
Yeah, we had an application that came out of the short-term rental policy was to apply for this tax. So staff had put together the application. It didn't receive the required support from existing accommodation providers. So we didn't proceed with the application. It's on hold. And then, yeah, it's on hold. Partly we wanted to revisit it with accommodation providers. And then we've sort of been in COVID and haven't wanted to really bring up again, like, hey, we know you can't have people stay with you or travel, but would you like a higher tax? We thought would wait maybe till after COVID.
Mhm.
But you're really asking it. You're absolutely right, Daniel. I remember, because I can remember now which of the accommodation providers held out. The way the formula works is it's based on the amount of rooms. And we have very few providers with any substantial amount. And therefore, any provider with a more substantial amount tends to dominate or have the ability to dominate the process. So what we're trying to do is for council really to assist in facilitating the introduction of the MRDT, are we not? Because we're going to have to work with Tourism Bowen and some of these people if we wish the MRDT to be introduced. So we're going to have to help facilitate that process. I'm not trying to be pedantic. I just read those words and I thought to myself, oh, okay, I think I know what we mean, but it doesn't seem.
Yeah, sorry, and it might just be that it's a little bit wordy, but that's the intent.
No. You basically want us. We favor the introduction, the MRDT. So whatever wording, so that council assists in facilitating the introduction of the MRDT, or any word that you want, but we're going to have to get involved with a few stakeholders here. If that's the case, if that is the case, Robyn, and it doesn't mean it's certainly possible.
Yeah.
I don't think it's a high priority for us.
As council, Maureen, you don't feel it's a high priority at the moment?
No, I don't think it's a high priority for this committee. I think it's moving forward as best it can. And I don't think further recommendations to council are helpful because the work is already underway.
Okay.
And even if it goes through, it's a very modest amount of money, is my recollection. Daniel, can you remember what Emma had estimated it as?
I don't remember.
No, I can't either, but
from my recollection, it was in the tens of thousands. It was in the sort of 30 to 50,000 a year range.
So it
wasn't insignificant, but it wasn't massive. Yeah. Okay, well, let's keep moving on because I know Maureen's got to leave in a couple of minutes. And I didn't see in number 4, I feel neither of those are sort of clear. I mean, they could be, sorry, they should be, have letters on them. They don't, they just have bullet points, but for what would be 4A and 4B. I feel like some of those, the researching best practices kind of come in other points, and what would be 4B, exploring solutions. Some of those are kind of coming up in the other ones, but I don't know if anybody sees those, something there that they think should be a priority. No. Well, if we can, go ahead.
But what do you mean by if you rank it in priorities between the different months, right? Then I can't.
Yeah, so that's what I'm thinking. Let's show up to the top, Steph, if we can, and to the list where we've kind of pulled out some of them. So how many have we got? We've got 6. Okay, well, that's not so bad. Then we can plan out the next 6 months. So I guess it's now just a prioritizing. Maureen, since I know you have to go in about a minute, are there any here on this list that you would like to see prioritized higher up?
The actionable items list.
It sits already in item 3, 2B.
Sorry, what?
But if you go to the proposed topics per meeting and you go to item 3 and then you go down to B, and it says already things that are really zoning oriented. It says trailer park, duplex zoning, cluster zoning. All of those are similar to item 4 at the bottom of the list.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So it's not like it isn't in there. So like, I mean, you're not going to do cluster zoning without looking at the land use bylaw, right?
I just want to jump in because I know Maureen's got to log off in a second. Maureen, are there any on that list that you would like to see higher up than just before you log off? But I think you said the actionable item. So what is number 1 at the moment? You're happy to see that as number 1?
We'll put this as July.
Sure. For now. Sure.
No.
No, I'll log off and you guys keep going and
Okay,
let me know when I can come back to the meeting.
okay.
Okay.
Thanks, Maureen.
Bye.
Okay, so anybody else have thoughts about which ones we should prioritize? Ahead of others. I actually quite like the idea of setting the targets sooner than later. Again, I think that sort of might help inform other things. Yeah, I'm seeing some nods. So maybe we make that September.
So do you want, just looking at the calendar, if we were to meet like the first week of July, do you think the first week of August would be okay?
I'm not going anywhere, so it doesn't matter to me. I'm not traveling anywhere, but I know other people might be because things are kind of opening up. So,
Okay, I'll just put September for now.
Yeah.
So which one was it?
As you've listed, number 2, the set targets.
Oh, perfect. Okay.
Yeah, let's kind of put that down. And again, people, like, everybody just jump in if there's other RFPs. Oh, and then maybe, so then I'd actually like to see what is in this list, number 4. Maybe that can be October again, because we've already done quite a bit of work on that. It would be really nice to wrap that up and get it done.
The one I highlighted there?
Yeah. So I think I'd make that one October if we could.
Okay.
Wherever you want to put that. And then to be honest, the last 3 for me are pretty, I think they're pretty interchangeable. I think they're all useful discussions, and I don't really see any of them being a higher or lower priority. I mean, I can't see, as much as I hope we'll discuss some RFPs and EOIs that we think council can do, I don't think discussing them a month or 2 early is going to delay any possible implementation or anything.
Oh, actually.
So does anybody feel strongly about those last 3, if they should be in any particular order or prioritized out of this list, number 4, 5, and 6?
What at item 5, what you just highlighted,
Yeah.
it's very much to 2. Like is it true or not?
Okay, so you think that would be a good one to follow up after? So
Well,
maybe that should be in number 4's place?
Well, how can you set a number of units and then later you try to figure out what the advantages are? Like,
Okay, so.
you know what I mean? You first have to somehow, you have to have a bit of a feeling about the big picture, and then.
That's what I sort of feel like the targets are. I mean, when we get into it in September, if that's the month or whatever, we can discuss it. But I don't know that we necessarily have to be specific about what's in the cove or what's out, or we can, discuss that or leave it open. But I do feel like, yeah, that item's kind of a separate. It's a worthwhile discussion and just sort of what that looks like. But I don't know. Do you want to explain it a little more, Fritz? How it either relates to, or it should come first or come after?
Well, if you first go to 2.1c, right, it says set targets. It means you kind of quantify it, right? And then you have housing types. But depending on what the outcome is of item 3, you may desire different housing types. Like, for instance, if everything has to happen right off the ferry in the cove, you end up with different housing type because you have to build a tower. Or if you want to have more of a lower density approach. I mean, I think, so in a way that relates to type and quantity. And maybe,
so do you think, yeah, go ahead, sorry.
Yeah, we may not be able to find the answer, but just to discuss it first before zooming in, that makes sense to me.
Well, I wonder, maybe, is it too ambitious to discuss those at the same meeting?
Yeah, same meeting.
Because you're right, maybe they are sort of part of the same discussion of saying, okay, where, what are the housing types we need? Where might they be?
Yeah, also, so, if you know what are the criteria for different housing types, right? Like, for instance, accessibility or family life or all these kind of things. Then if you address those, and then first in general, and then see where you can actually build those, then it will, in my mind, affect how you quantify that in which areas.
Okay.
But you know, like I'm just saying, is just because you discuss something, that doesn't mean you're going to have the perfect conclusion, you know?
Oh, no, not at all. I think it's just a way of tackling these and trying to get through them. Okay, well, let's put that on September and be optimistic in what we can accomplish that day, that month. Okay, and then any other, so we can just sort of wrap this up and move along because we've got lots of other stuff to discuss. Any strong feelings? So we'll just assign November and December to those ones. And
yeah, fine.
Unless I hear any strong objections from anybody else in the group, then we can.
No, because we can change it, right?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. We can change it if we find something else comes up sooner. But this at least gives us an action plan for now.
Okay.
Okay. So I'll put these in that Google Doc. This list.
I think that would be great. Yeah, and then we
maybe reshare the link. I've got a bookmark.
Share the link, and then we can, we can see how that might work and for everybody.
So,
okay.
Wonder if I.
Okay.
Oops. Can you guys see my screen? Like, can you see
Yes.
the Google Doc now?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. So this is the Google Doc. Oops. And there's me adding it to it. It looks like there's been quite a bit of work up here.
Yeah.
Going on.
Okay. Maybe Glenn's put in a bunch of stuff and
Maureen's been
comments.
responding.
Okay. Okay, great. Good. Okay.
I will stop sharing that. Do you want to make a little
We need to make a resolution
I don't know.
or
I like them
recommendation.
because it's just showing there's some unanimity. So just
Okay,
that you
so-
resolve to allocate monthly priorities as discussed.
Sounds good.
Allocate monthly priorities from the 2021 HAC Work Plan as discussed.
Mhm.
Okay.
Okay. That's it. Do we need to vote or anything, or that's all
Sure, do
good?
it.
Okay. All in favor of those recommendations? Yep. Okay. Excellent.
Okay.
Let's move along. Council referral for Grafton Lakes housing. Daniel, I think we're over to you.
Excellent. Thank you, Robyn. I just have a presentation to give people. I want just to give an overview of what this referral is about. So I'm just going to start my screen share. All right. So council has referred a proposed housing agreement to do with a development on Grafton Lake, and it's a housing agreement for an affordable home ownership project. So council in 2018 approved adopted bylaw 440, which allowed what's called the Grafton Lake development. So it's a development centered around Grafton Lake, which created the CD21 for us. And as a part of that development, it stipulated that there would be 35 units that would be provided under terms of a housing agreement. So 25 rental and 10 ownership. And the 10 ownership lots are to be in the first phase of development, and the 25 rental are in future phases. So the 10 ownership units are in phase 1, and they're proposed for the current lot 3 in an active subdivision application. So this is just to orient. Can you see my cursor when I sort of draw on the screen? If you're coming down Grafton Road, there's a new road that comes off on the north side of Grafton Road that comes in past the lake and ends at our new water treatment plant for Cove Bay. So this lot 3 on the side as you go by is the proposed site for these 10 ownership units. So staff and the developer have worked to craft the housing agreement. And through that, we seek council input on several policy questions that remain. So this was presented to council and referred to the housing committee for your take on it before we try to craft what those criteria would be. So the first question, and I'm not sure how best to do this, if I just go through the questions and then we can touch each one in more detail.
I think so. Yeah, give us a highlight of all the questions. Yeah.
All right. So the first is qualified purchaser criteria. So who is able to buy these units? What criteria are there? Next one would be the selections. So who actually then chooses, of the people who are qualified, who gets to purchase the units? Resale price, so how is the affordability captured going forward? There's a couple different models that are often used. Next one, looking at resale of the purchaser, so how are subsequent purchasers selected? And finally, there's this question about a Cove Bay water contribution. So we require a contribution to be made to the water system as part of development. And so it's about $10,000 and who should make that contribution. So those were the 5 questions. I go through a little bit more detail of each of them.
Okay. Yeah,
So
let's dive into each one then.
all right. So this is the qualified purchaser criteria. So I've given in some instances Belterra example. So Belterra has 3 units as part of their 30-unit co-housing that have the same model of affordable home ownership. So Belterra had this requirement, which essentially said you can't own property anywhere in the world for at least 5 years prior to when you're joining. There was no other, well, so you have to be a resident, a permanent employee, or a retiree on Bowen. So resident on Bowen makes sense if you're a permanent employee, or retiree meant you had to reside on Bowen before you retired. And that was trying to think of a way to capture people who maybe worked on Bowen and retired and moved off the island, but would still like a chance to return to Bowen, but there's a connection there. As we've been working on this agreement for Grafton, one of the things that come up is the idea of identifying people who, for example, maybe they've, their life, their life circumstances have changed. So that they've divorced, they've separated now, they no longer own a home on Bowen, but they have within the last 5 years, but are now not able to purchase again on Bowen, and how to capture that. So another model that I looked at was BC Housing's Housing Hub has a home buyer eligibility. And so what it instead looks at, you don't own an interest in property now, and you have, but not the 5-year stipulation, and it has then a household income limit. So it says you have to, there's a limit on how much money you can make and still be eligible for it. And so that's an option, as well as we would look at what a Bowen equivalent limit would be to place on the units. And those are the 2 examples that sort of given for qualified purchase. I don't know if we want to talk about that one first before I go into other items.
Yeah, I think it'd be good to take each one on. So does anybody on the committee have any thoughts on, because we have those 2 examples, the one from Belterra and then the one that's example from the Housing Hub. And I think when I read through our agenda, oh, that was maybe from the old agenda, sorry. Look at May's, because I did some comments on the May agenda. So there was that the developer had concerns, like you mentioned, about the time limit on making it the 5-year limit. So does anybody have any thoughts before I jump in?
Well, I kind of thought about it a little bit. I found it actually kind of strange. Like if you try to figure out, like people save money to buy a home. And then I thought, does it make it, why is it okay if you make money on the stock market or any other way with a portfolio or whatever investment you have, but not by having an investment in a house or in an apartment? I don't get that, because like most people that buy actually do that. They sell what they have and then they buy what they need. Now take an example that you have, you live alone as a bachelor, now you meet the partner of your choice and life goes on and you need to have a house for your family. Now you can't use the equity that you have in that apartment or so. To me, that doesn't make any sense. To me, it doesn't matter where the money comes from. It is more important that the person needs it. But I also think is that there is an expectation in the way it's written that you cannot trust people. But I read some of this stuff twice and I thought, if you don't need to apply for affordable purchase unit, you're not going to do it. You're going to buy it yourself because there is no real incentive except that maybe it costs you a little bit less. And quite frankly, if you talk about affordable housing, but I noticed too in that same document, including the map that you just showed, from Grafton Lake is that the affordable market units actually support and finance the rental component. You can see that twice in the options that John Reed gave. He gave 3 options to council or to Bowen Island municipality, and it's clear that the more affordable market housing they can do, the more rental housing they can provide. So it's almost like, I'm kind of puzzled if that affordable market housing doesn't make any sense. If you look at the market, how the market goes up and down and all that. But anyway, I think it's more and if you go back to who's a qualified person. Now, again, why does this person need to work on Bowen for so many years? It doesn't make any sense. Let's say if you raise a family and you're the caretaker of the family, and your partner dies, who's the breadwinner, right? And he worked on Bowen. Now you're out to lunch. I think all these things are just random from my point of view. I think if somebody needs the housing, and if you have some logic for it, then they can apply for it.
And then do you think that maybe we recommend that priority be given to people who live or work on Bowen? Is that like, so it's not sort of an outright absolute necessity, but simply through the process that people who live or work on Bowen or retired from Bowen, whatever that description is, are given priority?
Yeah, if a person lives on Bowen, there's some rationale in that, because I guess if you want to address the housing need and you don't really succeed because everybody storms towards the island and buys a unit, that was an unintended consequence. But there are other unintended consequences that don't seem to be very fair.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay. So is that it, your comments for this item, Fritz? That I think that was really helpful.
Well, I also thought that is it really true that the person should be actually an occupant? I'll give you another example. Let's say your parents or your mother, somebody who you really treasure, lived for a long time on the island, and you're the daughter or you're the son, and you want to help your mother, right? Then I just don't know why she hasn't worked on the island officially. She worked at Butto for years, but it wasn't like in employment. I mean, so I find all these things just not thought through at all. Like, it's almost like you have to take a step back and you have to think about what's the purpose, and I say it again, I think that people who are going to apply for the affordable market housing will only be people that really need it. And if you say they have to live on Bowen, you almost have to find reasons why you would not allow them to apply.
And I think it's, Daniel, how it's proposed is that it's a resident or an employee or a retiree, like at the moment.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Work 5 years on the island, and then you retire, and then you're allowed to apply.
Yeah. Okay. Does anybody else have thoughts? Ron? Yep, go ahead.
Well, I agree with the general tone of Fritz's comments. I think there's a lot of very arbitrary requirements. And one can question just about every one of them. And we end up with this Byzantine system that I'm not sure advances the purpose at all. But I would like to ask Fritz, you made an interesting comment about the cross-subsidization of the rental units by the for sale units. That's interesting. But
I just noticed that if you look at the 3 options that Grafton Lake, John Reed presented, you can see that if there's more affordable market housing, then there automatically is more rental housing, because it seems to add in funding it. And then what I would think, is it not better than to only provide market housing and just take a number of units, market housing, that are used to provide more rental? You know what I mean? So it's like, where does the money come from? That's the question.
Well, I don't. So Michael, go ahead.
Robyn, look, this is complex because every circumstance you can lay down, whether you lay down 4 bullet points or 10 bullet points, the first 3 people that come in front of you to be evaluated in some way will probably straddle over all of them or just not fit into any of them. There are certain, you're going to establish certain standards or criteria for this, for housing. And I'm wondering if it follows, you can establish some general principles based on income, based on need. And therefore, if you like, it's kind of a little bit like a point system, or I wouldn't like to get hung up on that term. So if they've already lived on Bowen all their life, excellent. If it's patently obvious that they've been in rental accommodation and this is their opportunity, whatever, then, they want to stay on the island and so on. And then through this, you will say, well, okay, this is a very strong merit application, and it garners, so many, again, I don't like the word points, but so many points, and keep it more open for interpretation. My concern is you're going to draw some very strict guidelines, and rather, as Fritz said, the first people that come along, as luck would have it, aren't going to fit into any of these neat categories or parameters, and they're going to say, oh, yes, and then you're going to have to review them. So I wonder if we could build in a little inherent flexibility and a little bit more interpretation, realizing, of course, it's going to make it more difficult on the people coming to a decision. But I can't see, even if you have rigid guidelines, being able to apply them, because people's circumstances, Robyn, aren't rigid. They tend to be fluid and general and changing. So I think I'm suggesting something based more upon criteria, which obviously makes for a strong application or not. And we look at the way that might be viewed in a more general term, and using guidelines for which we might apply this judgment.
Daniel,
so
do you have? Yeah, go ahead.
I was going to say, no, I've seen in like grant applications where they'll give criteria. They say like this category is worth 25% of your score, and this is worth something. I guess, yeah, it's just having rigid guidelines can be handy if in this case we anticipate, there's 10 units. I don't know how many people we anticipate applying, but my sense is it's going to be more than 10.
Daniel,
so in that case, having stuff set out beforehand where it's clear we can point to it and say, okay, you've met or you haven't met the criteria, is easier versus whoever's doing the evaluation, if it's trying to assess the special circumstance for each person, and then we're saying, well, yes, you're special enough, and you're not. That's
I think it's like, how much is subjective and how much is objective? That's kind of it. Like, I appreciate what you're saying, Michael. I do get it. I think there's a delicate balance to be struck, because you don't want it to be so subjective that it's basically whoever the team of people that are making this decision can just make any decision they want, because I don't think that's fair and transparent to anybody. But I appreciate if it's completely objective and it's like, you must meet these 5 criteria or you don't have a chance, then yes, you might be missing out on the opportunity that somebody in some unique circumstances who really is truly deserving, might not fit into that box, and might otherwise be approved.
You can write same objectives, you can write it less prescriptive. Give an example. If you have as one of your criteria that it would help people to stay employed on Bowen, that's a fairly clear criteria. If they have to move off island otherwise, right, then you can say, oh, okay, that's a good reason, but it's more written as an objective. Does it meet certain objectives?
But don't we really just have 2 criteria here in abstract terms, and that is attachment to Bowen Island and need for affordable housing? And I don't know.
I think that's a good summary, Ron. That's pretty much it, right? Like, and one thing that I really like, that just going back a few minutes to what Fritz said, I hadn't thought of it this way, and I really appreciate his different perspective, is does it really matter if somebody has owned property or currently owns property? Because I think you're right, Fritz. What if somebody works full-time at Bowen and owns a small condo somewhere in town and really wants to move here with their family because they're outgrowing their condo, and this would be the perfect thing for them, but because they technically own their condo, they don't they don't, it doesn't apply to them. So I wonder if I would prefer to see it, I think to Ron's point, I think you summed it up beautifully, Ron, is do you need this housing? And I think that would be looking at an asset and income sort of test, right? And we have some guidelines for income, and maybe it can let you, decide what exactly the income should be. But I think BC Housing can give you some guidelines there, especially given its ownership. Obviously, the income levels are going to be fairly high to be able to manage that mortgage or whatever that looks like. But I think assets should be taken into account. Again, the threshold might be high given people might own property already. I would probably suggest to exclude retirement savings because I think that's only fair. Somebody in their 20s in need likely has way less savings than somebody who's in their 50s or 60s and in need who might have retirement savings, and you can't begrudge the older person for having retirement savings. So I'm not sure exactly how you do that, but I think Fritz is right. Somebody who maybe hasn't owned property in 5 years, but has $1 million in stock portfolio, are they any more, deserving than somebody who owns this little condo in town or something? So I don't know if that was, I know income was part of it. I don't know if assets was automatically a part of it, Daniel. Was that a consideration?
It wasn't in that BC Housing example I'd given.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not sure why. I know when I was first working with the lawyer on drafting the housing agreement, he was cautious about asset tests, I guess. And I think maybe just because of like the lawyer's concerned about how you verify that and how you're, like, what are we doing? We're not like auditing their things. They're saying like, oh, it looks like you gave $1 million to your friend who's going to give it back to you or whatever, so it's like, how would we set that up? I want to know that it's possible.
Yeah.
Daniel, can you maybe answer this question? How much is the percentage intended to be below or expected to be below market?
That's a good question.
30%, 50%?
Yeah. I don't know, I guess, and partly because I feel like right now the market is changing so much. Like basically what we'd arranged was a set amount for like those soft costs and then basically construction costs, like cost of construction, and that's what they would sell for.
But it's land value too, right? Or not?
Yeah. And so I think so
then it's maybe 10 or 15%.
Yeah, so that's what it sounds like. You'd be in that ballpark.
Okay. Now imagine that you have to get a mortgage for a house, and the average house price, according to the what do you call it, the tax
MLS. Yeah.
You know that the tax rate is 1.3 or 1.4 million. Okay, so you take 1.3 million, whatever, or these houses are maybe half the cost because they're small. Let's say they're 600,000, right? Then you take 10% off, maybe they're 550. And then a person cannot own anything in real estate before, but they have to find $550,000. Most people can't find that. Like most people actually move up the real estate ladder, so to speak, by selling what they have and move into something a little larger. And the mortgage is the difference between what you sell and what you buy. It's actually really hard to get into the market. So then what I'm just saying is and then if you get a 10% discount, so to speak, and you have to comply to all these rules and you're being administrated, and when you sell it, you only get a formula back, of the price instead of just go with the market. I mean, I don't know why people actually would even do it. It doesn't sound like such an attractive proposition to me.
Well, so let's stick with the qualifier for purchasers, because I think unless you think it's critical, I think the resale price and all of that stuff is an important discussion. But maybe, because in the interest of time, because I don't know, I can't remember what the agenda said for how much more. Daniel, is that enough feedback from everybody on that first point? I know we're not really reaching a consensus, but hopefully that's enough just to give you our feedback on what exactly we on those things. Okay. And I'll just put my 2 cents in as well. In an ideal world, if we could manage it, I do like the idea that it would be some kind of point scale so that there is, criteria 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and that maybe there's a point system. And so if somebody so it's very clear what the criteria is and what the weighting might be, but if somebody's really low in one, but really high in the other, that it would balance out. Do you know what I mean? So somebody maybe doesn't have as strong a connection to Bowen, but they're very high need, or somebody isn't as high a need, but they have a very strong connection to Bowen. Do you know what I mean? Then that gives, so it's finding that balance of the objective and the subjective. So there's still a very clear criteria of categories or what you need to meet those, but then maybe their subjectivity comes in as to how you scale those or how they're balanced with each other. That it's not, you have to meet these 5, it's more of a, how do you meet these 5? And maybe some are really low and some are high. That would be an ideal place, I think, to land.
So how does it really relate to getting a mortgage? Because like if you go to a financial institution, right? They're used to units that sit in the market, and they give percentages out in mortgages, but they're not going to give you a 90% mortgage, particularly not on a somewhat experimental form of ownership. I just can't see that. Like, is this a proven method? Is this done actually, or is this?
Yeah, I mean, I think there are already examples, like Belterra and Whistler Housing Authority has a number of ownership units that are actually limited in their price. So there's definitely examples of it. And I think there are mortgage lenders. I mean, I think you can actually get a mortgage with 5% down or something. It's an insured mortgage. And from somebody was telling me, I don't know the details. I believe the federal government's doing a bit of a shared equity model to help people with down payments at the moment. I don't know the details of it, but yeah, but I think that's the responsibility of the purchaser, right? To figure out, I don't think anything we're deciding today, if that's what you're getting at, Fritz, I don't think any of these criteria that we're suggesting or recommending today would limit somebody's ability to get a mortgage. I don't think so, but I think that's a valid point to consider. Is any of this limiting that?
Yeah, and with the Belterra one, part of the application was you would submit that you were pre-qualified for a mortgage.
Yeah. Yeah, and it was the same for Whistler Housing Authority. I was just looking at their website, same thing. So you have to be pre-approved for X dollars or whatever the price of the unit is, which I think is reasonable. Yeah. Okay, so let's move on to the next one, because so which is purchaser selection.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, the question there was just who selects the purchasers and how are they selected?
So my 2 cents is I certainly hope it's not the individual developer, because I don't know that, and I don't know that it should necessarily be council or municipal staff either. I think it would be nice if they, I mean, I don't know if I should, what does everybody else think? And then I can weigh in with my thoughts. No, nobody else has ideas.
No, this is a really difficult one, because this is like judging the most beautiful baby competition. So if you want to be profoundly unpopular and never spoken to again, this could be the job for you, even more than sitting on council. So just a thought that I wonder, look, if this selection is made, someone's going to have to make it. Mm-hmm. Obviously, sorry about that. Mm-hmm. And I wonder if we can say, look, that is something that we would have to be decided, because that is a topic, Robyn, in and of itself. And I know I'm kicking the can down the road, but I cannot think this afternoon. I cannot think. Someone in the end is going to have to make a decision. And I'm not sure, quite honestly, who has the right to make the decision. It's a pretty powerful decision. You're making a decision with great impact on someone's life. So I'd like to know whether anyone faced with a similar problem has come across a solution, so we could look for, and I'm sorry if this sounds a cop out, but a best practice somewhere on how this might be achieved. I don't know whether Belterra or anybody else has got some guidelines.
Yeah, I mean, like, the Whistler does, where the Whistler Housing Authority, I believe, manages the wait list. But they're sort of established and have an established wait list. For Belterra, originally it was going to be the Bowen Island Housing Corporation, I think we were going to establish. But when that didn't go, essentially it was done by the Belterra Co-Housing Group, selected. Yeah.
So, I mean, oh yeah, is that your final thoughts, Michael? Yeah.
Well,
I mean, if we could find another established way of doing this, it might be able to present us with some helpful indicators.
Mhm.
but, you have to watch something like Belterra, because I read this book about co-housing. There's 2 books out there at least, and co-housing develops completely differently. It starts with a small group of people that have very shared values. They like to work together. They take the initiative and they take people in. The rest of the group is selected by the group who started the original co-housing. And the reason is that co-housing falls apart if the group is not, if they don't share values. Now, you don't want that for this particular project. It's not a co-housing project.
Mhm.
It seems to me
Ron?
that what's needed, I think what's needed to make these decisions is maybe perhaps a 3-person committee, and perhaps there could be nominees by the developer who does have an interest in having the right people in there, by the Bowen Island municipality, and then I don't know who the third party would be. If it were an established if we're up and running for some time, then a member of that community might be appropriate. But for getting it started, I don't know who to suggest.
Yeah, I actually completely agree with Ron. I was going to suggest a committee of some kind, and maybe 3 is the right number of people. And I was also going to suggest that so I'm in agreement. The developer have 1 nominee, municipal or council, whoever has 1 nominee, and I agree. Maybe the third one's simply a member of the public that applies, and somehow between the developer and the muni, they sort of manage the process of selecting that person. I'm not, maybe they have to select the person together, that it's just I'm not sure. So maybe we can leave that with Daniel.
Maybe it should be a summer resident, because we don't know any people on Bowen Island anyway.
Yeah. And I don't know, I feel like I don't know that panel itself could be anonymous. I'm not sure if you could get away with that, or if that's fair and transparent, but I feel really strongly, and we're working through this on Birch's as well. I feel really strongly that the applications should be anonymized, so that people apply, and then through some managed process, their application is, the names are stripped off, anything that can personalize it or give away information is stripped off, and they're just given a number, and the committee only sees the number and the hard details of the application, and then they make their, whatever their selection criteria is based on that information. I think that's hopefully really obvious and clear, and because then hopefully it takes, because I don't think the committee can necessarily be anonymous, but hopefully it takes the burden off of them, or any of the flack, as you kind of alluded to, Michael, that it's like, this is how we best manage the process to be fair and transparent. I mean, I think that was something that was in the agenda in this written thing. I think we want it to be as fair and transparent as possible. And I definitely agree with not having it be first come, first serve. I think everybody would agree that that shouldn't happen. And so however they manage that with, set amount of time to put your application in or whatever, with some sort of fixed deadline, and then it's a weighted criteria. Is that enough for purchaser selection, Daniel? Is that enough feedback?
Yes, I think I had, Robyn, just a question then for you in your other hat as Birch, in terms of like, would Birch have interest in being a part of this? And maybe it's a question for later, but.
Yeah, no, happy to discuss that. I mean, I think it's a role that we would like to play in the community. It's not sort of formalized at the moment, but for us as a nonprofit, I mean, because the housing authority never happened, we would like to see that we are filling some of that role on the island. So I know we have 1 project in progress, but we would, I'd be really keen to help if we can, and we could be seen as that sort of neutral third party as a nonprofit organization trying to help and facilitate these. So yeah, we can definitely take up that discussion. Yeah. Okay, so let's move along to number 3, resale price. I'm sorry, I'm looking at my old agenda, so correct me if I'm, because that has the comments in it. So correct me if I'm wrong here. What were the questions here? This, Daniel, give us the rundown.
How is the affordability captured?
Yeah, so I think that the typical ones are, is it market less a certain percent? So for example, Fritz, if we say, okay, the market rate is this and it's being sold for 15%. So in 10 years time, when somebody else wants to sell, they get it, and there are examples of this, they get it appraised and then it's sold for 15% below that. And then either way, actually, in any of these examples, somebody has to manage that resale process. So I think that's somewhat to be determined. There hasn't been any turnover yet at Belterra, as far as I know, so it hasn't come up, but that's another factor that somebody has to manage that, but let's leave that aside for the moment. The other one, which is what the Whistler Housing Authority does, is it's sold at X dollars, and then it's literally written into it that it only goes up by a certain percentage each year, which is usually linked to CPI or something like that. And so it will only ever go up a very small percent. So it limits the amount of equity that people can build, but then it keeps the housing extremely affordable. And so it is a trade-off. And I think it may, I don't know that how it will or how much, but it may influence if people choose to buy or not. Because if it's a certain percent below market, you kind of know you're still going to build equity, but you're always just going to be that little bit below. But if it's limited to CPI, you're not going to build very much equity. If its value is going up 2% a year, and real estate's going up 7 to 20% a year, whatever the crazy numbers are in the Lower Mainland, in 10 years' time, your house is not going to be worth very much. So you're not going to have built much equity. But in the meantime, you've had very affordable, stable housing, and then the next person also gets very affordable, stable housing. So those are the two that I generally know of. Daniel, are those the two that are sort of being considered?
Those are the two. I mean, I know I've had discussions with people about, other models where it's like there's a loan that gets paid back and then the money goes into the, housing affordability fund or something to purchase more housing. And I've said that always sounds more complicated and like works better when you have a steady stream of housing being developed that's affordable.
Yeah. Okay, Ron, comment?
Isn't there a third logical possibility that the ceiling sale price be allowed to grow not at CPI but at the real estate inflation, the housing portion of CPI?
Well, I think that's what that percent below market is intended to capture.
Well, but
so that it still moves up with the market, but that it's a certain percent below whatever that market rate is.
Quite a different way of calculating it. I mean, different numbers.
What is the relationship between the real estate market and the CPI?
CPI.
That's a basket full of things you buy in a grocery store historically, right? Mm-hmm. And they are already and they already the consumer price index is already disputed, and they are already going to put in a different formula because it doesn't represent true affordability. So it's kind of a strange number. It has nothing to do with housing. I mean, the housing can go up and the basket goes down the other way.
And I think, actually, Fritz, if I may, I think that's actually the entire point. If you can think about a Whistler Housing Authority who has, I don't know how many, I think they're up to hundreds, dozens, if not maybe up in the hundreds of these units that are these, very, very low, right? Limited to CPI or whatever the index number is. It's like, it's just in theory meant to be 2 to 3%. I think the idea being, because right now our housing and real estate is so disconnected from people's actual income and what they earn and what everything else costs in life. I think that's the idea, is that through this mechanism, you're actually now starting to link like reality to real estate, not all of the other crazy influential factors that are making our real estate go up by absolutely insane numbers. The average person out there working, earning whatever it is that average income, if you're an employee, what kind of raise do you get each year? You get a 2% raise, maybe a 3 if you're lucky, 1 if you're not, 0 if it's a bad year. Okay, I'm seeing shaking heads. I've been an employee for years. So, you get roughly a 1 to 2%, like I'm just roughly, right? A raise per year. Like you don't get, real estate goes up 5, 10, 15, 20% a year. Average people don't get raises like that. So there's no way anybody's income can keep up with the cost of housing. So I think the idea behind the CPI one, and it doesn't have to be CPI, it could be some other number, it could be anything else. It's to completely de-link the value of this real estate from the craziness of the real estate market, and to actually link it more to something realistic like people's income and how that might grow over time. So that's the concept. And like I say, that might change people because you won't earn much equity in your house, but that's not the idea. It's like a co-op model. You don't earn any equity if you live in a co-op, right? You earn 0 equity, but you have stable, affordable housing for the long term. And I guess in theory, hopefully you put the extra money you put aside into your savings and grow it in different ways. But that's the concept here, is that I think that's really, if you, Daniel, correct me if I'm wrong, I think that's the crux of the two arguments. Is one is really decoupling the real estate value from the crazy real estate market and keeping it very, very low compared and closer to people's affordability and income. One is actually saying, no, let's let it trend with the market, but just keep it at that permanent, what you think you're trying to get at, Ron. Trend with the market so people can still build equity, but it's always going to be that X% below market, so that it's always going to be that edge of affordability. It's always going to be down and under a little bit, but you're still going to let people build equity and it's still going to move with the market. So in my mind, that's really the distinction, the larger principle that we're talking about, whichever specific mechanism we use.
Robyn, in the end, it would be like, in the end, a house maybe 50% less expensive, right? I mean, that's the idea. That's what you
in like 10 or 20 years, I would think so. Yeah, it would be significant.
So then you do create, and actually in the process, you do create an affordable housing stock, market housing stock.
And I think that's what Whistler is trying to do, because you can imagine in Whistler, I can't imagine what their real estate costs are. They need to provide housing for employees who are in that exact situation, that they earn probably a lot of the minimum wage, if not too much more, whose income goes up 2% a year or whatever, they're lucky. There is no way they're keeping up with that. And so they want to create this housing stock that is available to those people. So personally, that's what I would be voting for, because I think it's something that we need on the island. I don't think we need more housing that's trending with the market, and I love that it is a percent below market. And if we had a whole bunch, it would be nice to have a mix, because I think that would be a great thing to do. But I would really prefer, because it's going to be much deeper affordability for people. Maybe not this first round, but it will be for future owners. And then it also might, limit. Yeah, go ahead, Ron.
You would prefer which?
Sorry, the one that say would be linked to CPI or whatever mechanism, the one that would be very low, that people wouldn't build equity. It would be very, very affordable in the long term.
Everything about that is good, except the scenario where people live in their home for 10 years and then get transferred or something like that, and have to go to another city and discover that they've built up no equity to speak of in their home, and they have to buy something at a much higher price. Now maybe that's
Well, I agree. And this is something that they should be educated on and completely go in with their eyes wide open. I hope that 10 years in, nobody is discovering that they fully know with eyes wide open. And then the other thing that I like about that is it will change the type of people who might apply for this housing, right? Potentially. Is that these are going to be people who, like you say, Ron, these aren't people who are looking to build equity. These are people who really, truly want to be on Bowen for the long term, barring life circumstance changes, which you can't control. But this isn't somebody who's sort of just here. They think they'll work for a few years, they're going to move, or somebody who thinks they're going to invest and build some equity and make great advance on the real estate market. So that's where my thoughts are, that I really think that Bowen will benefit from having these really, really deeply affordable, again, like I say, maybe not the initial purchasers, but having that housing stock protected. And I like that word, decoupled from the craziness of the real estate market. I think in the very long term for Bowen, that will be a huge benefit. And you can imagine if every time we're having these developments, we're building this stock up more and more. So we have 3 now, we're going to have 10 more. Imagine, we build this up and in 40 years, we've actually got a couple hundred of these units around. It means that we have this really, really affordable housing stock for the people working at the grocery store currently for $15 an hour, and whatever the equivalent's going to be in 40 years. That they have an option that they could buy a home and have a family here on Bowen. They don't have to live in a studio apartment in somebody's basement or something, right? So that's where my thoughts are. I feel pretty strongly about that. So I'm not sure as a housing committee how everybody else feels.
No, I think actually you're right. If the long-term housing stock is key. I just thought, like, if you have the first iteration at the beginning, right, it doesn't work all that well, because then people have to find this huge amount of money and somehow park it. You know what I mean?
Yeah, agreed. It will be a struggle for these first buyers.
For buyer one, kind of, I can see that it's great long term for sure. But it's one thing I noticed too in the text. It says assessment somewhere. It should not. If it's going to be not the formula, Robyn, that I think is the best one, the one that you discussed. But then if it would be based on on an assessment, it should really read appraisal, because assessments, I don't,
Yes,
they're already
true.
out of date the moment they're
And-
kind of mailed to you, and then
that might have been my misspeaking. Yeah, but you're correct, 100% right. It's about appraisal, not assessment.
normally it should be 2 appraisals or something like that, because
Agreed.
yeah. So
And there are precedents for this. At SFU, there's a development that is this model of X number of % below market, and they do have, so we can find that out if that's the way that people want to go. There's precedents for it. Yeah. Okay, so I think I've made it clear. Fritz has made it clear. Ron, did you have a clear feeling? I don't know that on did CPI versus the rising with equity.
No, I'm persuaded. CPI sounds good.
Okay, and Michael, as the other member of the committee here.
Yeah. Wow.
Oh, you're muted. There you go.
I wish I could. Could we go with that and saying that as our story unfolds here, that we will also put it under review? Because let us suppose that the housing market looked very different in 9 months' time. So let's just say, as of today, that this is our best thinking that we can come up with.
Well, and I think this is our recommendation as the Housing Advisory Committee, right? And this is going to go into a housing agreement, and then it's going to be reviewed by council, presumably, Daniel. It's going to be reviewed by them and approved. So there is time for reflection. But I think I feel pretty strongly that us as the Housing Advisory Committee and looking towards the long-term future of Bowen, that I think that the one that would be limited to CPI or whatever equivalent mechanism, it doesn't have to be CPI, but whatever that equivalent mechanism that would limit the growth to, 1, 2, 3, 4, whatever % per year, I think that's the model to look for. And like I say, there's models out there. Whistler's doing it. I mean, Belterra's already doing it. So whatever that mechanism we think is, but I think it feels like it's a consensus from the committee that that's the way to go as a principle.
Robyn,
Okay.
it may affect it may affect the amount of money that the developer gets. So you have to somehow if people buy the first unit, right, they may not be interested in a small reduction like in the cost, while the developer probably looks for a certain amount of return. And I think that return has also some impact on what they supply for rental housing. There's a linkage somehow.
I don't think we should worry about that, because I think they're committed to building these and they're committed to a housing agreement, right? So I think at this stage, and I think from what Daniel was saying, the land is really what they're providing, which at this point, I'm assuming is kind of a sunk cost for them. There's some development costs, I'm sure, that would flux, but it sounds like it's going to be land and soft cost plus whatever the construction costs are. So I think essentially they're not making profit on these is kind of what I'm hearing. But let's not let that cloud our discussion at the moment on this particular item. And I want to move on. I've got 2 more things to get through. We're already over time. So I kind of want to make sure I don't wreck everybody's day here.
And I was just going to say quickly on that. I mean, I think the developer's main concern is it not be so onerous that we're not able to identify, 10 qualified purchasers for the units.
Right.
So if it happens that we have a housing agreement and it's advertised and like 2 people sign up, right, and nobody else wants to do it, then it's like, okay, this is obviously too, the formula is not working. Yeah. Something's not working in how it's set up. We have to revisit.
Yeah.
That's what I meant. It basically means the price is high and it's not interesting enough.
Yeah. Okay. Okay, so let's move on. Number 4, how to choose potential buyers on resale. Is there a question here? Because I mean, I think you've sort of got it. The municipality or a third party could maintain a wait list. I mean, or take the responsibility if and when the time comes. Is there a question, Daniel?
I think it's more just if we're maintaining a wait list. Like I think it was envisioned at the time of the Bowen Island Housing Corporation and Belterra that we were going to maintain a wait list. Well, we haven't maintained a wait list, and in part because there was 3 units created that have never resold. So it seems almost like false pretenses if we've been holding a wait list for 10 years. It's sort of giving out hope to people that there's going to be a resale soon, versus if we just don't, and unit comes up and we have to essentially restart the process over again to find a buyer.
Yeah, I think I'd agree with that. I think wait lists, given the number of units we have and that they're not a high turnover, I think it's a lot of administration for not a lot of benefit for anybody, not a lot of benefit for potential buyers and not a lot of potential or benefit for, the resale, and certainly not for the developer, because once the initial ones are sold, they're out. So, I agree not maintaining a wait list, and something that we've done for Birch, if I can put on my Birch hat, is not had a wait list, but simply had like an email list for information so that you can at least register your interest. So if you're interested, you can at least sign up on the email so you know that you're going to be advised if and when something happens, but you're not technically on a wait list for anything because there really isn't anything to be waitlisted for. And then I think the important thing would be just to make sure people have lots of time if and when the time comes up, that the resale isn't like, 2 or 3 weeks. It's like you've got to give a couple months so that people can have notice, and because it takes a lot to get a pre-approved mortgage and all of those things. So people just need time to be able to kind of do that. But I hope that could be kind of managed later on. Is everybody in agreement with that? And could we move on to the next one, or does anybody have any comments?
Yeah, fine.
Yeah.
All good.
Okay, great. Okay, and the last one, hopefully this is quick and easy, Cove Bay water contributions. Do you want to let us know quickly the issue here, Daniel?
Sure. So this is as part of expanding the Cove Bay system to include these lots.
Yeah.
The municipal policy is that they pay a per unit fee, which is about $10,000 right now.
Yeah.
So essentially the developer was asking, well, what's the expectation of who pays that fee? So in essence, if we're charging the developer to add the units, it's like the expectation is that it goes on to the purchase price of the units. Council has in the past waived the fee occasionally. I would say staff doesn't support that because in essence, that means that the Cove Bay water system is funding it, is supporting it. And we, I would say as staff, it's like if we had an affordable housing fund, that would be an appropriate contribution that the fund could make to lower the construction costs. But without it, like the staff recommendation is, essentially gets paid as part of the same as like a servicing cost, and it goes on the purchase price of the unit.
Yeah, and my feeling, if it truly is a $10,000 fee, and these units, we're going to be lucky if they're $500,000 or $600,000. I suspect they're going to be more. My feeling is I don't think that it's fair for it to be waived. I think it should just be included because there's going to be all sorts of other servicing costs, and I think water, electricity, all of those things. If people are getting propane, like that's just a cost of the development that I think should be rolled into the cost of it. I don't think that the rest of the Cove Bay, people on the Cove Bay system, the system users, should be paying for those 10 units, because I think it would be different if it was like a completely nonprofit, low income, that's kind of different. And I say that coming from Birch, so let's not, I'm not putting it out there or anything, but I feel like that could be a different discussion. Whereas, yes, these are affordable, but they're also ownership. These are people making, a median, if not above average incomes. Like, it's kind of a different ballpark. I think they're important units to have on the island, but it's not like we're trying to get the price down, grind the price as absolutely low as possible to. So does anybody else feel strongly against that?
No, I agree. It's just a
Discuss it.
construction cost.
Yeah, that's what I think. It's just a construction cost to be rolled into the cost. I mean, and I agree with you, Daniel. If we had a housing reserve fund and there was money in there, I think it would be a great way to contribute. But I don't think so. Okay, I think enough said on that. Anything else? That's all I'm seeing on the list here. Is there anything else we haven't discussed?
Those are my questions.
Awesome. Okay, and we're only like 20 minutes behind time.
Can I share a screen to capture?
Please, to capture. Yep.
I'm nervous. I hope this is what you said.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
We're gonna be voting on it.
Yeah, we were speaking very freely here. Okay.
Can you see it?
Yes, can see it. Okay. So should I read it out? The Housing Advisory Committee provides the following recommendations regarding the proposed Grafton Lake Housing Agreement. So number one, regarding purchaser selection, that the selection criteria be broad, attachment to Bowen, and need for affordable housing. Is that fair to say? And that the selection criteria be weighted if there are multiple criteria.
I feel like there was for this broad piece, and then there was the point system. I don't know if those part of the same.
Yeah, and maybe the only thing that I would add to that would be that to find a balance of objective and subjective criteria, or a way to balance that, so that there's find a balance of subjective and objective, and maybe sort of yeah, criteria, or you get what I mean with that. And so that there's maybe build on that to say so that there is some transparency, but also flexibility.
Or interpretation, I think Councillor Kale said.
Yeah, and flexibility for interpretation, sure.
Or I can-
And
Or
one is that the process is anonymous.
Yeah, so
Yeah.
anonymizing the applications.
Oh, that
Maybe
comes
it's
later.
it's a new
That comes
point.
later.
Okay.
Oh,
Okay.
Isn't it?
Okay. Yep. Perfect.
I think it's under 2. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. And hopefully, because I mean, Daniel, really, this is for you to take away, and you'll have the video of this, and you've, I'm sure, been
Yeah.
making notes. So we'll just capture the highlights here. So number 2, regarding selection process, selection panel comprised one developer nominated member. So it's not necessarily the developer themselves, but they nominate nominated member, and one BIM. I would say
Not necessarily staff. Sorry.
I don't think staff member, but a BIM nominated member. So I'll
Okay.
leave that as to whether staff or council nominate that person. I'm not sure. And then one member of the community, and I would say, to be determined. And again, I wear the 2 hats.
I
So
say like preferably housing, like
yeah. So I mean, I wear 2 hats, so I'm not sure, but like maybe it's a Birch person, maybe it's somebody else from the community, but like I don't want to put that in there because there's
that.
Yeah, or a similar organization, exactly.
Okay.
Is everybody else like? I feel like I'm
It's good enough.
I'm borderline on what's having to recuse myself for sort of like I'm nominating myself.
Okay,
I'm not-
preferably from a housing.
Yeah,
Or
that's a good idea because it could be somebody
From,
else from a housing organization.
Nonprofit or no, you're
I think a
Housing organization.
We
Okay.
we get the idea. And then,
And then-
applications are anonymized. I think it's that they're not anonymous, but they're anonymized. I don't know if that's an actual word, but
it's a cool word.
yeah. Okay.
And that's on that
So
one.
that. Okay, number 3, regarding resale price to be decoupled from the real estate market and aligned with another standard, example CPI. I think that's perfect.
Robyn, you should add the reason for it, to create a long-term.
Yeah. Okay. So to create long-term.
Sustainable.
Yeah.
I call it truly affordable.
Yeah. Create long-term.
Oh, create affordability in the long term.
Yeah. So to create affordability in the long term.
or more significant affordability, because it's
Yeah.
it's not just
That's-
a little bit more
yeah.
affordable, it's significantly more affordable.
Yeah. Agreed.
Okay.
And I think that's really what seemed to resonate with people. It's not really about these initial purchasers. It's actually about the long term on Bowen. That's
Mhm.
great, Fritz. Thanks. That's a good addition. Regarding subsequent buyer selection, do not maintain a wait list, but provide sufficient notice. I think that's fine. And then the Cove Bay water system debt repayment, contributions to the Cove Bay water system debt repayment should not be waived. Yeah. Okay.
Maybe they say it's just another construction cost,
Yeah.
because it almost is
Oh.
as if it's so different because it's done by the municipality, but
Right. And
not true. It's
so
just-
maybe should not be waived, and then maybe we say staff instead of period because they should be considered a construction cost along with other site servicing.
yes.
Yeah, it should be considered a construction cost along with other site servicing.
Yeah.
That's good. I think that gives a rationale. Yeah. Okay.
Woo!
If everybody's okay with that, should we
Yep.
a motion? Am I allowed to move, Steph? I'll move.
Yes.
Yes, I'm moving it. Whew, let's get it out moving. Somebody second.
Yes.
I can't see everybody. We're doing this. Michael second,
Yep.
and everybody in favor. Okay, wonderful. There we go.
Here we are.
Okay, and we're so behind. I don't know if
Yes.
That's
we
my
had
fault. I
any
don't think I
other-
gave that section enough time.
no, that's okay. It's robust discussion. I think we should probably adjourn just because we're so over time. I feel, and I'm sorry if Maureen's been waiting in the wings. Are we able to bring her in, or is she still hanging around?
I can text her.
Oh, okay. No, I think just let her know. So the only thing that you had brought up, Steph, was you had some ideas for recruitment. Does that need to be discussed in the meeting, or is that something we can discuss offline? Yeah. Okay. Anybody else have anything important they feel we need to squeeze into today's meeting? No. Okay. Thanks, everybody.